I've been playing a ton of Marvel Rivals, farming idiotic clips like this one right here, learning because I'm kind of a noob at hero shooters, but I've been having a ton of fun. But while enjoying the game, I thought to myself, why don't we have more free-to-play fighting games at this scale? And how is 2XKO only going to be the first big one? Fighting game developers have been trying to transform the fighting game genre into a live service one since like a decade ago or more. And free-to-play video games are the industry standard for live service games since like the 2010s or even earlier. So why are fighting game developers so behind in this, when we all know that a good free-to-play fighting game could make the genre massive again and go beast mode? So it is absolutely ridiculous that fighting game developers are not making more free-to-play games. And that's what we're gonna talk today. The future of the fighting game genre through free-to-play fighting games. If you enjoy content like this, of course, leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Do you really think that free-to-play fighting games are the future of the genre? Because I really do, man. And stay until the end, because we're going to talk about the Marvel Rivals as our core example of how to make a really successful free-to-play video game and how that can translate into the fighting game genre. When we dive into the current state of free-to-play fighting games, there is basically nothing there. There is no big AAA free-to-play fighting game to play. You could argue that there is some free options like Granblue Fantasy Versus, for example, but the free version of that game is basically a demo. It only has a couple of characters, not all the features from the game, and that is the reality for most free-to-play fighting games. There is nothing to do about it, but we have an upcoming game called 2XKO, which is developed by Riot Games in the League of Legends world or lore, a huge thing, gigantic IP, and there's a lot of things that this game needs to do well to succeed, but if it does, it's going to change the industry forever. Not because it's going to change the gameplay or anything like that, but because it's going to show big companies that maybe free-to-play is the way to go to develop fighting games. And if a game like 2XKO does well, why wouldn't we suspect that big companies like Capcom or SNK are not gonna try to make their own big free-to-play AAA fighting game? At the end of the day, the fighting game industry is an imitation game. A lot of the times, the most successful fighting games are just imitating and mixing a lot of key points from old fighting games that were already a big hit. So I can assure you that if 2XKO does super well, fighting game devs and companies are not going to ignore the fact that it is a free-to-play live service game. And not only that, but 2XKO is going to become the business model to copy if any other dev wants to make a free-to-play fighting game, just like what happened with MOBAs and League of Legends. And that's also why I'm talking so much about Marvel Rivals, because this game is having the most successful launch for a free-to-play video game in the last decade or even more. And I'm convinced that there are 4 key reasons that we're gonna talk about today that free-to-play future fighting games and also 2XKO of course need to imitate about this game. The first big reason is roster and IP power. Marvel Rivals of course has access to Marvel characters, which are some of the most beloved characters out there for video games or any sort of media, to be honest, especially after the success that the MCU was. So anyone will want to play a game that has some Marvel characters on it if you suspect that the game is good. And the same thing needs to happen with future free-to-play fighting games. 2XKO has actually already done this. The fighting game, of course, is set up on the League of Legends world, lore, and characters, which are some of the most beloved characters in video game history, because League of Legends is one of the most successful video games in the history of this industry. But not only that, do you know a little series called Arcane? Yeah, it is very obvious that Riot is trying to expand their media through video games into other things, you know, like other audiences, other types of not only video games, but also series, movies in the future probably, and other genres of video games, not only MOBAs. So this is the same thing that any fighting game developer needs to do if they want to make a huge free-to-play fighting game. You maybe don't need to make it at the scale that Riot's doing, because Arcane is a huge thing, like a multi-millionaire project, but you could, of course, choose the correct characters, choose the correct world and history to make your free-to-play fighting game. If you're gonna make, for example, a Street Fighter or Tekken free-to-play fighting game, maybe you could do an animated series before you take the game out to the market, and also choose a mix of classic and new characters for the game, just like 2XKO is doing and also Marvel Rivals did. Marvel Rivals has an incredible roster, It has a lot of characters, which is a really big thing. All characters are free, you don't need to pay a single penny for any, and you don't need to do any sort of collectible thing to unlock them. And also, the number of characters is very big. And you have classic ones, you know, like Captain America and Thor. You also get some characters that got big thanks to the MCU, like Bucky, for example, and some more obscure ones, like Jeff the Lang Shark or Luna Snow, who actually have gotten super famous thanks to the video game. So they're actually using the video game as a platform to make money with obscure characters that basically do not make you earn anything if you don't use them like this, which is super smart. So fighting game developers need to do the same thing. This is an example of how you succeed. The other key thing that we gotta talk about is gameplay and accessibility. Marvel Rivals are example of a free-to-play success. Has a very low skill floor but a high skill ceiling when it comes to playing the game. It's pretty easy to get into, but it can also get hard to play some characters well, depending on which character you want to play. Let me guess which other type of video game should be like this also? Yeah, fighting games. We need the same type of dynamic in a good fighting game, and we need a roster that is balanced, that has, you know, high execution characters that are hard to play, like Spider-Man, for example, in this game. But we also need stupid characters that are very easy so people can play the game casually and have fun, and they need to be equally cool. The high execution character does not need to be better and cooler than the low execution one. They need to be the same. Both cool, so anyone can have fun. Over the years, it seems like this is a definitive way to design gameplay for a video game. Like, everyone wants to play the game on a different way, and if you offer that to the player base, they are gonna stay, because they can play it on a try-hard way, on a casual way. You don't really need to stress about playing the game on a very specific way because the devs want you to. And it seems like this is the best way to make a free-to-play game that is very successful, because it creates the opportunity for people to play the game on a very big range of options, which makes everyone happy. For our fortune, it also seems like 2XKO is doing the same thing. There is a lot of different ways to play the game. You can play it solo or with someone else as your teammate. You can also play with different types of specific strengths for your team and the characters you choose. There are characters that are harder, other ones that are very easy. If I'm not mistaken, also the game doesn't really have like directional input, so the skill floor for the game is very low, but the skill ceiling is super high because it's a fighting game, so it is high by design. And that is what could make 2XKO also a success, just like Marvel Rivals, because they're looking to be similar, and it seems like 2XKO is taking the same good decisions that have made Marvel Rivals a huge hit over its first months of launch. Any free-to-play fighting game that wants to be developed, any company that wants to do it, needs to follow these two big reasons that I just described, because they are the key things, the core reasons as to why Marvel Rivals has been an incredible success, and also as to why maybe 2XKO will be one of the biggest hitters of 2025 if the game comes out this year. And the other two reasons, because I said that they were four, are actually kind of like mixed together. And those two things would be monetization and competitive features for the game. Why do I think of those two things together? Because I see them as quality of life features. Marvel Rivals has them, and free-to-play fighting games, 2XKO included, needs to have them. You cannot have like a super predatory, incredibly greedy, monetization system. It's not gonna do well, and it could kill your game literally at launch. That has happened with a lot of video games, not only free-to-play ones. So you need to be very, very considerate about how you develop your monetization system. Marvel Rivals has a pretty decent one. You can buy battle passes and you can unlock them eternally. You don't need to unlock them in the same season that you bought them, because that tends to be a problem with a lot of video games that are free to play and have battle passes. At the same time, the game sells you cosmetics, like skins for different characters, and they look pretty cool. Some of them are pricey, others are kind of like okay in terms of price. So the monetization system is basically decent. It's not the best in the world or anything, but it's also not that bad. And that is the same thing that needs to happen with 2XKO and with any other free-to-play fighting game. And last but not least, you need to have a lot of competitive features in your game so it does well. What do I mean by this? For example, you need to have good netcode. If the game doesn't have good netcode, it's going to be a mess. And no one will want to play a free-to-play fighting game that has, for example, delay-based netcode that works awful. Like, you need to have rollback, it needs to work well, like most modern, fighting games. and that needs to happen, or people will cry about it. They will have a bad, gameplay experience because of the netcode, and they will leave. You also need to have, your ranked mode so that the game is fun to play and it can be competitive. You also need to have some casual modes and basically create an experience for the consumer and the player that is balanced, so that they can have a competitive experience that is good, but also a casual one. And this, if you have all of this, these 4 things that we have been discussing in this video, I think that the future of the fighting game genre could be free to play. And Marvel Rivals is one of the best examples of how to make a perfect free-to-play game that can last for a lot of years and be a huge hit. And I truly believe that fighting games have the potential to do the same thing and become incredibly big IPs for the masses. So, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe, leave a comment again, what do you think of this topic, and see you on the next one, guys. Enjoy some Marvel Rivals.